have no dearth of dragons. They are called Vermithor and Silverwing.
Yes, and if only they had riders, none could stand against me.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 5 video. There's a whole bunch to talk about, a ton of Easter eggs and book references, so we'll break it all down. Everyone grab your milk of the poppy. Aegon's going to be drinking that for the rest of his life, trying to prove that Targaryens can in fact be burnt by some fire, especially when it's dragon fire. I know there's going to be a ton of questions about that going forward. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. The actual episode title is Regent, a reference to Aemond becoming Prince Regent. Interestingly, they still haven't changed the intro title, adding any scenes for the battle at Rook's Rest. Do you think they'd do that? It was such a big event. Maybe they're waiting for the sowing of the seeds in the dragon seeds, because that was like the other big thing this week, is setting up the dragon seeds. The opening scene starts with Corlys at Driftmark the next day after Rhaenys' death, with him lost in sorrow, having now lost almost his entire family to Rhaenyra's cause, if you don't count his granddaughters who are still alive. We see Rhaenyra's reaction also just as saddened, like she's very sorrowful, but she's also very cognizant of the fact that Corlys probably isn't her biggest fan right now. Back at King's Landing, we see the small folk fighting over the meager scraps of remaining food because Corlys has been blockading King's Landing this whole time. That hasn't changed, so there's almost no food left in King's Landing. With everyone kind of horrified, thinking that this dead dragon that they parade around is a black omen of terrible things to come. They think of it as an abomination. This is a real big deal, in a bad way, because it does not have the effect that Criston Cole or Aemond is hoping it will have. Their whole reasoning is that they're showing how powerful they are by killing Rhaenys, one of the dragons, the most powerful weapons on the planet that everyone in the realm has lived in terror of for so long. Dragons are the reason why the Targaryens were in power for so long, because everybody was terrified of the dragons. It didn't step out of line. So they're hoping that this will inspire more loyalty from the small folk, like, look what we did, we were able to kill this powerful dragon. But the whole idea is that the dragons themselves are meant to be sacred to the Targaryens. They're their most precious resource. They worship the dragons, kind of like gods in a sense. So parading her head through the streets is kind of a perversion, like a heinous act. And a lot of people will point out that even Maegor the Cruel, as bad as he was, would never have done something like this to one of the dragons. Also, by showing the small folk a dead dragon, they're also taking away a lot of the fear that had kept everyone in line for so many years. The Greens are effectively eroding their own power base too.
I thought the dragons was gods.
As soon as people can see you can kill dragons, well then anybody can do it.
Making everyone think that dragons aren't that big a deal. They've been taught their whole lives, like, oh look, it's not that terrifying, it's dead right in front of us. So if people in Westeros aren't afraid of the dragons as much anymore, that means the Greens, theoretically, or any Targaryens in power, would have a way harder time of keeping everyone in line, thus all the rioting you see. Normally you wouldn't see them going that crazy. Gawain Hightower also notes that they can barely call it a victory at Rook's Rest after all the collateral damage. Notice Hugh Hammer and his friend also just as horrified, but Hugh Hammer says that it's just meat. The dragons are not gods because he's so preoccupied with his daughter, the food shortage right now. Also probably setting up the idea that he's not afraid of the dragons like most of the small folk. This will be important for later because he is meant to be one of the dragon seeds. We just saw Ulf White, who said that he's the bastard son of Balon the Brave, Daemon and Viserys' father. So we've already started to see some of the dragon seeds in the background. They've been trying to introduce them slowly over the course of this season. So anytime you've seen a person and a dragon in a scene together that seem kind of weird, or them focusing on characters that seemingly have white hair for strange reasons, is because they want to set up some of these dragon seed characters. Alicent clocks the Valyrian dagger on Aemond's hip and then clocks their secret Aegon cart as they sneak him into the Red Keep. Mostly because he can't walk, and it's covered because they don't want anybody else, mostly the small folk like the lesser nobles, people outside their inner circle, seeing his body that way, seeing him so weak, so that the Greens can maintain this sense of authority and power. People won't perceive them to be weak if their king almost died. That's also why Aemond and Criston Cole give credit for killing Rhaenys to Aegon instead of having them tell the truth. He's the one with Vhagar who killed her, and Aegon and his dragon Sunfire were essentially useless in battle, like he just hurt their chances rather than helped them. Also, the people will perceive Aegon as being a great warrior to be feared, turning around public opinion after the whole event with Blood and Cheese and the rat catchers, hanging them from the walls, which is why Otto Hightower was so pissed off at him in an earlier episode. Basically all that goodwill that they had originally built up with the funeral procession with baby Jaehaerys. Notice how Helena doesn't seem particularly saddened, like she just expected this to happen, because she probably saw it in one of her many dragon dreams. She's basically seen the entire future, like she's watched all the Game of Thrones DVDs. She knows what's going to happen. I did a whole separate video about all the visions they revealed on the walls that she's scribbled, like she's graffitied all the walls of the Queen's chambers with her different dragon dreams. So I'll post a link to that down in the description below, because there is a lot of stuff from the main Game of Thrones series, like Jon Snow and Daenerys, Robert's Rebellion, all that stuff. Notice how they also bring out Blackfyre, Aegon the Conqueror's ancestral Valyrian sword, meaning that he did take it to battle with him. It also becomes a very critical piece during the actual Blackfyre rebellions later in the timeline. That's like one of the next big civil wars that the Targaryen family fights, but it's not till much later in the timeline. We will probably see that on some other show. So they just want to let you know, oh, Blackfyre the sword, still fine, still intact. We're just going to put it over here for safekeeping. They slowly pry his Valyrian armor off his body, Aegon the Conqueror's armor. The book stated that it had been partially melted to his body, but the armor itself did save his life. Like, they're very clear about that fact. Like the Maester says, it's because of the armor that he's alive. And it doesn't look totally ruined, so I think the idea is that Aegon the Conqueror's armor did survive this. Like, it might be a little charred, a little crispy, but they probably just polished it a little bit and it should be fine. To be fair though, forging Valyrian steel, even though the art was lost over the years, like the Valyrian pyromancers don't really exist during this part of the timeline anymore, so people don't know how to create new Valyrian steel, they only know how to reshape it. So you can melt it down even with regular fire, but I think part of the idea is that the creation of Valyrian steel involves dragon fire and some blood magic. But I think the idea is that Aemon's Dracarys didn't last long enough, like the blast wasn't long enough in duration to completely melt the Valyrian steel armor. And because it was meant to be worn into battle by ancient Valyrians, like Aegon the Conqueror himself got it as an artifact from ancient Valyria, so the armor itself was already old when Aegon the Conqueror wore it. If it was meant to be worn by the Dragon Lords in battle during ancient Valyria, it means it's probably got some special fire resistance in it too, to dragon fire as well, like on top of normal Valyrian steel. Meaning that in some future series, we can see somebody else wearing that armor. When Alicent goes to see him all laid up, it's meant to be a mirror for what Viserys' last few years were like. He spent his final years in bed, most of the time hopped up on milk of the poppy, like father, like son now. Alicent literally just told Aegon about this whole phenomenon when she was explaining how she used to rule the realm with Otto Hightower because Viserys was so laid up for his final years. So it just seems like Alicent's lot in life has become to care for a lot of sick men. Aegon might seem worse for wear, burnt toast right now, but he's not as far gone as Viserys was in his final years. It just seems really, really bad right now. But he is truly unable to do anything else, thus they need a regent. But notice in the background, like you see the Silent Sisters here, they're just in case they need to prepare his body if he does wind up dying, but they also do care for the extremely infirm as well too. Like, they're not there just for dead bodies. Notice how his leg is wrecked. They talk about this later, like many of his bones were broken. Part of the idea is he's not really able to walk after this, paying off one of Helena's dragon dreams in season 1 when she said the last ring will have no legs.
The last ring has no legs at all.
And notice how Aemon seems like he could care less about what's going on with Aegon here. His first thought, like the first thing out of his mouth instantly is, who's going to become king in Aegon's stead? Alicent then asks Criston Cole to explain himself, what happened at Rook's Rest. He seems like he's tamped it way down deep inside, like, nope, not talking about any of that messed up stuff, like he's got serious PTSD.
And the king's dragon, Sunfire, was long in the dying.
They also clarify that Sunfire is dead, so that's a big book change. In the books, both Aegon and Sunfire bounce back eventually and are active in future battles. Like, Aegon is able to fight and fly on Sunfire later. Sunfire gets up to some really important stuff. We don't need to get into that because it's kind of spoilery. But if they're changing the Sunfire part, it means they're changing the stuff that Sunfire was involved in later, which is really big stuff, meaning that you can develop brand new theories about how the Dance of the Dragons is going to go down now. Like, there's going to be some bigger book changes later on. Or maybe they'll just give some of the Sunfire plot to one of the other dragons like Vhagar. There'll probably be a lot of discussion about this after the next couple of episodes, just because Sunfire is so important to things that happen later, to some of the other major characters on the show. Everybody pulling out their theory boards, developing brand new theories about how the plot's going to change. Criston Cole tells Alicent Aegon won the battle for them. He has no idea what Aemon did during the battle at all. Like I said, probably just because he's so messed up. I don't think he's got some secret plot here, like he's not trying to help Aemon secretly take the throne. It just seems like he's super traumatized. Rhaenyra's Black Council still worried about Daemon's ability to raise an army in the Riverlands, correctly so, because it seems like he's not doing so hot on that front by the end of the episode. And they also want to make it seem like her own Black Council don't respect her enough, even though they're willing to support her, but mostly for the sake of power itself. Like, they want to be on the winning side of the war. It's not that they care about putting her on the Iron Throne. And in fact, Daemon also gets up to this later in the episode too, when he says that he intends to rule Westeros and Rhaenyra's just welcome there with him. Like, she can be there, but I'm going to be the one on the Iron Throne. What he says is also kind of supported by the way that Rhaenyra's Black Council acts towards her. Like, it's all well and good during peacetime, but we're in the middle of a war right now, so we can't have you making decisions because you're a woman. She correctly clocks that they have no more battle experience than she does because the realm has been at peace since King Jaehaerys was crowned, and that was when he was very young too, so the realm has been at peace for a long time. So essentially, all the people that are alive right now in the timeline are sweet summer children like the original children on the Game of Thrones series who grew up during the long summer. There are a couple exceptions there, like Corlys has fought in a lot of wars. Daemon fought during the War of the Triarchy previously down the Stepstones. So there have been battles that people have fought in during these past many years, but not really big wars on this scale here. When she mentions Maidenpool and Cracklaw Point, those are her nearest supporters nearby the Blackwater Bay here, calling them to arms just to prepare in case Criston Cole and the Greens come back. The other real big concept that they tease during this small council meeting of hers is them wanting to assault King's Landing, like basically time to move while Vhagar is still recovering from the actual battle itself. Because even though they haven't really got into it, part of the idea is that grumpy old grandma dragon, as big and powerful as she is, takes a lot of sheep to fill up that gas tank. So after a battle like that, any of the dragons, no matter how big they are, would take a little while to just get back to 100% before they can actually fight again. So they want to use this as an opportunity to take King's Landing, but they don't want her to go. That's a big point in the episode too, where she feels really ineffective because they won't let her go and actually act during the war the way she wants to. Also setting out the idea of the dragon seeds, the other people who can ride dragons that they are comfortable letting go fight. Like the small council will say, okay, that's fine, let's let these other people go ride the dragons and then go fight in the battles. But also remember this whole concept of them taking King's Landing, she says that she has to be the one to be there when they're taking King's Landing. It's the same idea what Daemon says in the episode too. He wants to eventually assault King's Landing. So it sounds like at some point they will pay that off. I'm not expecting that this season, but there's supposed to be like one other real big battle this season. We'll see where that winds up happening. They just want to build things coming to a head at King's Landing eventually. Maybe they'll save that for like the beginning of season 3. It could happen at the end of this season, but we'll see. Jace talks with Baela about their grief over losing Rhaenys in the library. He tried to take off on his own without permission to get Daemon to come back because they're still looking for more people with their dragons. This is before he's figured out that the dragon seeds are out there. These are probably some of the biggest scenes they've given him on the show so far, like this scene here and then him later at the Twins. His whole idea, though, is that if he can get the Frey's loyalty and get them to let them use the twins, he can get Cregan Stark and his Greybeards, the Wolf's Teeth, back to the Crownlands much faster. There's a lot of references to Cregan Stark and his force of men coming from the north later in the episode too. Then we get kind of a funny scene with Daemon and Caraxes trying to force the Brackens to bend the knee, fulfilling the Blackwood's request in order to secure their loyalty, but he basically winds up pulling another blood and cheese here. Like the way they play this transition is kind of funny, making it seem like he's going to have Caraxes eat Lord Bracken. When they're talking after they've left, the castle in the background is probably Raventree Hall, which is the seat of House Blackwood. But like I said, Daemon essentially suggests that the Blackwoods themselves pull a blood and cheese on the Brackens, doing all kinds of atrocities upon them, which winds up biting him in the ass the same way that blood and cheese bit him in the ass. So it's another example of Daemon's own worst ideas hurting him. Then we see the Vale for the first time on House of the Dragon, starting with the Gates of the Moon and the Bloody Gates. We saw both of these during the original Game of Thrones show. The Bloody Gates are just the ones that are further out. The Gates of the Moon are the ones that are right next to the castle. We meet Jane Arryn for the first time, who's ruling over their house at the moment. She's unmarried. She's meant to be a lesbian. She has this lover in the background. Generally, the crown, like the Greens, do not like that, but Rhaenyra is totally cool with it, which is one of the reasons why Jane Arryn is a supporter of Rhaenyra's. But also on top of that, she promised her these dragons, which they talk about at length during this conversation. When she mentions many an army have bloodied themselves against their gate, and essentially the castle is impregnable by ground, that is, it's a reference to the Bloody Gate itself. And she tells Rhaena their only real weakness is from the sky against a dragon, thus her request to Rhaenyra for them to send a dragon, but she does make fun of the fact that the dragons that she did send are tiny and barely useful. That's meant to be Joffrey and baby Aegon's dragons, Tyraxes and Stormcloud. This whole conversation and the idea of Rhaena also helping defend the castle might also set up her being the one to claim Sheepstealer. There are a couple references about Rhaena claiming dragons later in the episode too. Sheepstealer is meant to be much bigger than Caraxes and Syrax, but not as big as Vermithor, like a really, really big dragon. Rhaenyra vents to Mysaria about how the Black Council is trying to keep her effectively trapped at Dragonstone. This also ties to the taking of King's Landing when she'd theoretically fly into the actual battle, like she'd actually be able to leave and hop on her dragon. When she says she was given her father's cup instead of a sword when she was a young girl, she was Viserys' actual cup bearer. That's why in episode 1, season 1, we saw her filling his cup. He even made a joke about it.
Cupbearer must not be late. Leaves people wanting for.
They show Alinda Massey, one of her ladies-in-waiting, to set up her later in the episode. She winds up becoming the woman in red that people have been confused about since the very first trailer drop. Like, wait a minute, is that Melisandre, Lady in Red? It just makes you think of Melisandre. But no, it's Alinda Massey in King's Landing, just trying to be all secret. Rhaenyra also states that she doesn't want to crawl back to Daemon begging for him to come back, but she does need his help. It's kind of the same on Daemon's side, like he doesn't want to ask Rhaenyra for help. When she stands in front of Meraxes' skull here, I think the idea is they want to liken her to Queen Rhaenys, Aegon the Conqueror's sister wife, who was a great dragon rider, but thought of as more of a lover instead of a fighter, because those are a lot of the things that she's complaining about during the episode, about how they want her to be more woman-like. They think of her as a woman, so not as effective in battle, and because she's the queen, they won't let her do anything, so they just want her to sit around and wait. Later in the episode, there's a funny contrast to Visenya, Aegon's other sister wife. I'll explain that when we get to that part of the episode because it's kind of funny when Jace is like, please don't use her as an example. There's an important reason for that. Notice Mysaria clocks Criston Cole's mistake in showing the dead dragon to the small folk. Rhaenyra also gets the idea too because there's this food shortage in King's Landing, and the two of them basically set up the idea that Rhaenyra can swoop in metaphorically and literally and save the small folk, like save them from their hunger and any of their problems because there's going to be some really big riots pretty soon. When Mysaria says there's many other ways to fight a war too, and we see Alinda Massey sneaking through King's Landing to meet with Deanna, the girl that Aegon theoretically impregnated and Alicent gave the moon tea to, we saw her earlier this season working as a tavern girl. I think that's meant to flow with the whole idea of the Dragon Seas, the sowing of the seas, just in general. Part of the idea is that they're looking for anyone with any Targaryen or Valyrian blood capable of riding a dragon, so we'll talk about that in a second too. She tells her the story of how she claimed Meleys by sneaking into the dragon pit and reveals Daemon also tried and failed to claim Meleys and was furious when Rhaenys claimed her instead, meaning that Rhaenys didn't have her before Daemon was born. Normally you'd think most Targaryens would claim their dragons when they were very young, but in some cases, like Viserys with Balerion the Black Dread, new kings would ride Balerion as they came along, so some of the new kings would ride Balerion when they came along. Jaehaerys was an exception to that though, because he rode Vermithor. But you have many examples of older Targaryens or people in their family claiming dragons, I think to set up the idea of the dragon seeds because most of them are all fully grown now. And maybe the idea of Rhaena also claiming a dragon like Sheepstealer because she's older at this point. When Baela says she wishes she knew Rhaenys when she was young, she actually married Corlys when she was only 16 years old, about as old as Baela is supposed to be on the show right now. Daemon then has one of his most trippy visions ever. It's of his mother, Alyssa Targaryen, who was one of Jaehaerys' daughters, married to her brother, Balon the Brave, just like Aegon and Helaena are brother and sister. She tells him basically what he wants to hear. He's more fit as a ruler, made to wear a crown. She was his favorite son. That might not be true, like I said, because she's just telling him what he wants to hear. It's his crazy weirwood vision. The whole idea with the blood on his hands, the blood on her, is a metaphor for the blood that he stained himself with over the years, and also her own death. Alyssa died about a year after giving birth to Daemon, which is also why he never knew her, which we find out later. Love the way that they transition again. They did this in previous episodes where they transitioned between Daemon's visions, where he's just like sitting around in the middle of a meeting or the middle of dinner from one of his visions. All the blood with the goose here too in the mention might be a reference to the Battle of the Cargill twins because the goose is their sigil. Notice how here and then throughout the episode, Alice Rivers has been watching him super closely. Like she notices that he's having visions. She also says later things that make it sound like she knows exactly what he's seeing in his visions. There are a couple of jokes about all the different things they need to do to actually repair Harrenhal, with Simon Strong just listing off literally every part of the castle itself. Like we got the roof that's been gone since the time of Aenys, who was Aegon the Conqueror's first son, who became the first king after he died. When he mentions the Wailing Tower, that's one of the 5 melted towers that Aegon the Conqueror burned with Balerion. But the joke here is essentially that the entire castle needs fixing and is full of bat crap. He also tells Daemon that Larys Strong took the family's holdings to King's Landing, like literally took all the gold physically to King's Landing, and there's only enough to keep the lights on here with just this small skeleton crew. He was hoping that Daemon would be the one to bring all the coin to pay for all this stuff. There are a couple more jokes about his actual title because technically he is called King Consort, but he keeps wanting to be called King, just laying out the idea that he wants to assault King's Landing, he wants to be the person on the Iron Throne, and what is that ultimately going to lead to? They have the small council meeting, they think Daemon has no chance of marshalling an army in the Riverlands, and Aemond as new regent wants to focus on retaking Harrenhal, which he'd been obsessed with previously. This also sets up the idea later in the episode when Daemon says to Alys Rivers, "Pray that you never meet Aemond One-Eye," because Aemond does intend to retake Harrenhal at some point. This pays off the big conversation he and Aegon had during Season 1 when Aegon went full Jon Snow and didn't want it and told Aemond that he should be king, like, "I'll give it to you, you can be king." This also gets back to Alicent's big mistake misinterpreting Viserys' final words. The whole idea is that Aegon grew up thinking that Viserys didn't care about him at all. Daddy didn't love me. Until Alicent told him that on his deathbed, Viserys wanted him to be king, obviously misinterpreting the prophecy now we know in present day. Right before he was turned into burnt toast, Alicent still hadn't told him the real truth about the prophecy. She only told him many sacrifices were made to put you on the Iron Throne, but she didn't really go into that in great detail. I think mostly because the show still has her doing her little Valyrian Targaryen research project to learn more about Aegon the Conqueror's dragon dream, the actual prophecy that Rhaenyra had told her about. Maybe that will cause her to tell Aemond or someone else about the prophecy. It feels like they wouldn't have her doing all that research about the prophecy if she wasn't going to do something with that information. Aemond himself always seemed like he thought he'd make a better king. He seemed like he coveted the crown. But because of the way the actor and the showrunner talk about him, he's always been so by the numbers, following the family rules kind of person. His whole life, he's never tried to usurp Aegon openly in that way. Until now, technically, kind of, it seems like their relationship into adulthood just continued to deteriorate, with both of them taking shots at each other, humiliating each other at every turn. Until the scene in the brothel, the showrunner said that was kind of like the line in the sand for Aemond. The worst thing you can do on the show is laugh at Aemond to his face. So the showrunner implied that Aegon doing that was the primary cause of Aemond giving Rhaenys a chance to kill Aegon before he went into battle at Rook's Rest, why he held back Vhagar, hoping that Rhaenys would kill him and deal with him that way. Then later when he full-on Dracarys'd him, not caring if he was in the line of fire. In that moment, it was more about him trying to kill Rhaenys and just not caring about Aegon. So at the time he wasn't actively trying to kill him, he probably didn't think that the Dracarys would kill Aegon, but he did want to hurt him. And when he found his body later, he didn't look bothered at all at the sight of his crispy body. So I think it's more correct to say that Aemond doesn't care what happens to Aegon and would rather that he just go away, quote unquote, for some reason, as opposed to him taking every chance he can get to actively kill him. Like he's just looking for an excuse for Aegon to have to go away, either because he's dead or because he's now hopped up on Milk of the Poppy for the rest of his life. So I think he is very pleased with the current turn of events. Like, he's in power now, Aegon catatonic for most of his life, so he no longer has to deal with him anymore, or so he thinks right now. The reason why the Greens didn't select Helaena, the current queen, Alicent, or Jaehaera, Aegon's daughter, should be obvious. It's because the whole reason why they started the conflict, the Dance of the Dragons, usurping Rhaenyra, is because they didn't want a woman on the Iron Throne. So they're not going to suddenly turn around and make any of the next females in line the next actual ruler. Also, can you imagine Helaena on the Iron Throne trying to hold court, listening to all those petitioners asking for help with different things? She would probably tell each of them their future, dropping dragon dreams for everybody, but everyone would just assume that it's total nonsense, thinking that she was crazy. They mentioned the food shortage in the city because of Corlys's blockade, how the small folk are getting pissed, like we're on the verge of an actual full-blown riot. Aemond's move to literally block the gates, probably not going to be a smart move, like that will bite them in the ass pretty soon. To his credit though, one of the smarter things that Aemond does is order them to cut down the wreck catchers that Aegon had strung up, which had been there rotting this whole time. We get more scenes with Hugh Hammer, his daughter, his wife, just setting up the idea that things are getting really bad in the city and they want to get out. They argue about where they're going to go, different places, but the idea is they really want out. Mostly to set up the idea of why he would turn against the Greens and support Rhaenyra instead. All the machines that he says that he was forced to build for the Greens were Scorpions. We saw them manning one of those in an earlier episode. As we see them carting out the rat catcher's bodies, we see Cheese's dog, still alive, none the worse for wear, able to leave the city, following Cheese's body, as loyal as ever as it's carted away. Seems like he's just been sitting there looking at his master's body this whole time. Allison has it out with Kristen Cole again, who implies that he's got some heavy PTSD, like I said earlier, from Rook's Rest, and it seems like he was being honest when he says he was trying to spare her from the horrors of war, which is why he didn't support her more inside the small council to become regent. Still kind of a dick move, and she basically tells him to keep my name out of your mouth. Then, as Aemon said, the Gold Cloaks do stop the small folk from leaving, closing the city gates. Set your watches for a big ol' riot, like it's only a matter of time now. Then we see Jace at the Twins with Vermax, meeting with the Freys. They talk about the Lannisters' army coming from the west. They're almost there. This is why they need their help so much at the Freys, the Twins. A couple funny details they introduce here too. The whole idea is that they absolutely hate the Tullys for some reason. They reveal their biggest fear is Vhagar showing up and burning everything. Remember, Aemon's big thing is also coming back to retake Harrenhal, and the Freys want Harrenhal. So like I said, this is all sort of building towards really big events in the future. But essentially, Jace is able to secure that promise. Like, as long as they get Harrenhal after the war is done, they will give all their swords and the addition of the Twins so that Kragan Stark can bring his Northmen south much faster. That'll be critical. So, like, of all the plans that seem like they go awry for different characters in the episodes, like Daemon's plans seem like they really go off the rails, Jace actually winds up being one of the more successful characters during this episode. What he accomplished here will benefit Rhaenyra greatly in the future. We get a couple cool scenes back at Harrenhal. We see Daemon in the middle of fixing the Great Hall here. It's called the Hall of 100 Hearths, but there are slightly less than 100. There's still many, though. It's that huge hall that they held the Great Council of 101 AC in way back during Season 1. But notice while this is going on, just like casually, low grade, he's just hearing screams in the background from his visions. Like he's still having visions, waking visions now. Those screams were meant to be his mother, who we saw earlier while she was busy giving birth to him. Alice Rivers clocks him again, sensing that he's still having visions. Like I said, probably sensing what's happening in the visions as well. She tells him all about all the strange things she's been hearing from nearby, the Riverlands, the different towns. That's the result of Daemon's suggestion to pull another Blood and Cheese. When she says she hears things in the wind, that's more of a reference to her knowing what Daemon is seeing in his visions too, because you hear screaming of his mother in the background too on the wind. Even though she seems kind of pissed off at him a little, like, you better watch out, this is going to bite you in the ass, they make it seem like they have some weird chemistry going on here, like she's weirdly tender when talking towards him. She kind of even gives him a little bit of a prophecy here too, because by the end of the episode, all this winds up biting him in the butt. He drops that line about her never wanting to meet Aemond One-Eye. Like I said, all foreshadowing that they set up earlier in the episode where Aemond says that he wants to retake Harrenhal. Then he talks about wanting to take King's Landing. Like I said, this foreshadowing that there might be some weird conflict between Daemon and Rhaenyra because they both want to take King's Landing, but they want to set the idea that Daemon will eventually go to King's Landing on Caraxes. There are a couple moments later in the episode that make it seem like Rhaenyra doesn't want it to come to that, like they will find some kind of arrangement, they will work together. But they also want to show that Daemon hasn't really been learning that much from his different visions, like he's still as selfish as ever. Alice Rivers mentions his mother, Alyssa, who he literally just saw in a vision. Like I said, he never knew her because she died within a year of his birth, also confirming she knows what he saw in his vision. Back at High Tide, Baela meets with Corlys. They drop all kinds of references to the lore and history from Game of Thrones. She mentions the Hall of Nine. That's a reference to the Sea Snake's famous 9 voyages from the books, where he collected vast wealth and all of these cool artifacts that you see around the throne room from all over the world, including Asshai, where Melisandre is from, that she says, and E.T., like way over in the Far East. They were supposed to be developing a Sea Snake TV show at some point for him to do all those 9 voyages during that. That was what they were going to cover. Supposedly that was put on the back burner, so I don't know if it's going to happen now, but they might wind up resurrecting it in some different form in the future. But I think the idea is that it would have been with a younger version of this character, not the same actor. Baela then explains Rhaenyra wants him to become her hand. It seems like he reluctantly agrees, and her speech does sort of turn him around a little. He tries to name her his heir, but when she says it has to pass to Salt and Sea, that's also setting up some of the other characters that they introduced previously, without talking too much about them, because we'll probably find out about that either next week or the week after that. Rhaenyra then orders Alfred Broom, the person who was yelling at her earlier, not respecting her, to go to get Daemon's help from Harrenhal and figure out what's going on. Like she's agreed to finally go back to, like, Daemon, please come back and help us. But also kind of because she's worried that Daemon might be developing his own army for himself, not for her. Which she's not totally wrong about. Like Daemon was kind of talking about that to Alice Rivers, about how he wanted to take King's Landing and Rhaenyra was welcome to show up if she wanted to, but he didn't necessarily expect her to be there. Then we see Daemon in the middle of another vision, but we don't see the actual vision itself when he's interrupted by Simon Strong. You can let me know what you think he was seeing during these moments here. The River Lords have arrived at the Hour of the Wolf, which is also a big reference to Cregan Stark in House Stark just in general. The Hour of the Wolf is also the name of a really big engagement later during the Dance of the Dragons, so it's them also foreshadowing a big major event that takes place in and around King's Landing. There's a lot of references to a big battle going down at King's Landing at some point, so I don't know if they're foreshadowing that for later this season or at the beginning of Season 3. But the River Lords are pissed off, and all Daemon's actions are now biting him in the butt, just like Blood and Cheese did. Like he told them to do another Blood and Cheese, it did the exact same thing. Now it's wound up hurting him more than it's helping him. And it seems like any hope he had of marshaling an army here himself is gone. I think to set up the idea of why he would want to leave Harrenhal, as in it becomes this lost cause for him. Notice while he's talking to them, he has another waking vision, this time of Laena again, speaking to him about all the terrible things that are happening in the world right now with the war, and if he's bothered to check on their daughters together. That's also probably just to tie them back into the story in a bigger way. Like I said, there's probably some big things coming for their characters, respectively. Like Rhaenyra, I think, is setting up Baela becoming one of the Dragon Seeds because we see her at the table in the trailers, and also Rhaena potentially claiming Sheepstealer. So I think it's the show just reminding you that those characters are important to the actual story. When the River Lords are telling Daemon off, they say the Riverlands are an ancient place watched over by the eyes of the old gods and the new. That's also a big reference to the God's Eye, which they're right next to in the Isle of Faces, important for Daemon's future, so just remember that bit. So like I said, even though it seems like Daemon was completely unsuccessful in the Riverlands here, Jace was very successful. Then back in King's Landing, we find out Mysaria still has all kinds of contacts in King's Landing. The Gold Cloaks let Alinda Massian, she is the lady in red that everybody thought might be Melisandre. She goes to see Diana, the girl that Aegon impregnated, Alicent gave the moon tea to. It's always possible that she did wind up having that baby, like she didn't take the actual moon tea, because we didn't see her drink it. But this is also probably why they included her in that previous scene earlier this year. It probably has something to do with the Dragon Seeds, because Ulf White was in that same scene with her. The Corlys ponders Rhaenyra's Hand of the Kingpin. Seems like he's made up his mind. And Aemon stares at the Iron Throne. He's not having a vision like he's really here. There just happens to be a spooky storm in the background. We find out that Helaena has come to see him. Love the way that she just appears in the background, Batman style. He kind of senses her like, you're here now. Revealing that she knows all about what he did because she probably saw it in one of her dragon dreams, asking him if it was worth the price. Like, you have the Iron Throne, but was it worth what you did to Aegon? We do see Aegon at the end of the episode, who's capable of calling out to Alicent, but very softly, just to let you know that he's hanging on there, just barely. And we get our big Dragon Seeds ending scene, the episode with Jace and Rhaenyra, talking about all the different Targaryen bastards and different Dragon Seeds out there. I'm sure somebody will translate the full Valyrian writing here, but all these pages are references to Aegon's sister wife, Visenya, with her sword, Dark Sister, which she calls out Daemon is currently wielding Dark Sister right now. When Jace says that he hopes that she doesn't use Visenya as an example and she gets kind of pissed off, the idea is that Visenya was Maegor the Cruel's mother who raised him and sounds like was a big part of the reason why Maegor did all the terrible things that he did. Maybe when they do the Aegon's Conquest prequel series, we'll get some references to this too. Like, you'll actually see her, which is probably why they're mentioning her so much. Like, oh, by the way, we're going to have a prequel show where you'll see her doing all these terrible things. Jace is basically telling her, please don't turn into the queen who burned them all. You also notice Rhaenyra is wearing blue during a lot of the episode. If you couldn't tell, this is a blue gown. It's for her mother, Aemma Arryn, from House Arryn, because Jane Arryn is her cousin, literally. Their whole conversation is meant to foreshadow Jace's sowing of the seeds, because in the books, he's a big part of the sowing of the seeds. Like, it's his job to go out and start finding all these different Targaryen bastards. They talk about all the different members of their family that never ruled or married outside of the family, like outside of the main royal family. So there are many, many people around Westeros with enough Targaryen blood to theoretically claim a dragon, but it's always a question of whether or not the dragons would want to bind with them. Because, for instance, they mentioned Rhaena, who tried to claim one of the dragons on Dragonstone, and they revealed she almost was killed in the process. Also, to set up the idea that when they're doing the sowing of the seeds and they start testing out to see if any of these different dragon seeds can claim one of the unclaimed dragons, get eaten by them. It's not just an automatic thing. Just because you have enough Targaryen blood or Valyrian blood in your veins doesn't mean you automatically can claim a dragon. It just means you have the potential to claim a dragon. They also mention a couple dragons specifically, like Vermithor and Silverwing. Vermithor was King Jaehaerys' dragon and has been riderless since Jaehaerys died. Silverwing was his queen, Queen Alysanne's dragon, who has also been riderless since Alysanne died. so it sounds like next week we're going to see a lot of sowing of the seeds. There's so much going on during the episode. If you spotted any references or Easter eggs that I didn't mention in the video, write them below in the comments. My episode 6 trailer video will post tomorrow, and my full episode 6 video will post next week. I'm also going to try and start doing Q&A videos again for the last couple of episodes, so if you have any big questions that you want me to include in those, just leave them in the comments. Everybody click here for that episode 6 trailer video. I'll update the link as soon as I post that, and click here for all my House of the Dragon episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.